Next, we're dealt 3 deuce of spades on the button. The hijack limps in. Remember, this is a 7-handed game. I've only got 6 opponents, and the hijack is the least experienced. My game plan is to isolate him in position as often as I can when I've got playable cards. I raise to 100. Although my cards are suited and connected, I admit that this is a bit too wide. The big blind calls, the hijack calls, we're going 3 ways to the flop in position. It's 8-6-5 with 2 spades. We flop a straight flush draw that no one will ever put us on if we hit it. The big blind leads for 175. This is a different opponent from the one who led into me 2 other times previously. The other guy's a 2-seat. This is the 1-seat who I beat in the full house hand that we just went over. I typically don't see leads into the pre-flop aggressor this many times in one session. It's interesting for me to travel and see what betting trends are pervasive in different areas. Leading certainly seems to be a common play at this game. The hijack folds. My hand is strong on the surface, but I could be in a lot of trouble if I'm up against a better spade draw. I call, hoping for the 4 of spades one time. In 5 years of making poker vlogs, I've never made a straight flush on camera. That's going to change. On the count of 3, get your mouse ready to click the like button for extra run good. 1, 2, 3. The turn is a 4. It's the 4 of hearts though. We still haven't hit a straight flush on the vlog. At some point that's going to change. I won't quit making poker vlogs until after that happens. The good news is that we've improved to the low end of the straight. We've gone from having no value to having a solid amount. The bad news is that the big blind bets 275. He's pretty much representing the straight with the 7. He's a smart guy and knows that this board will mostly favor his range over mine. I happen to have a hand that I usually never have, and I can't fold, especially with having the flush draw. I call, not being sure what to root for since there's some chance that I could still be up against a better flush draw. The river is the 6 of clubs, pairs the board, making it so there are even more hands that the big blind could have that are beating me, but he probably wouldn't have let it flop if he had 2 pair or a set at that time, and I don't know if he would have bet 2 pair or a set on the turn, so him having a full house seems unlikely. It doesn't stop him from firing a 3rd bullet. He bets 650. This is a gross spot. I was already wrong calling on the river once today. Despite having a straight, I really only have a bluff catcher in this situation. People just aren't triple barrel bluffing that often at any stakes. One more time, I can't fold. I call. The opponent triumphantly turns his cards over. He obviously has 9. Jack of spades. He flopped a better flush draw with 2 overs and a gutter to go with it, but he missed everything and tried to push me out of the pot. I actually like his hand to turn into a bluff since I can still have higher spades that I'll have to fold, and he at least blocks 9-7 of spades. We have him beat. I'm going to leave the sound on so you can hear what everyone says when they see what I've got. No one says a damn word as they try to replay what just happened and wrap their heads around me raising pre-flop with 3 deuce suited. It could have gotten me into a lot of trouble. I get very lucky that it works out. I win a large pot that results in me being within just $200 of the even mark after a rough start. 6-5 offsuit in the big blind, 4 people limp in, the small blind completes. I check, 6 of us see the flop. Historically, 6-5 offsuit is not the best hand, except in this instance, it comes 8-7-4 rainbow. The flop is damn good. We've got the nuts. Checks to the hijack who fires for 20. The cutoff calls, the button calls, and the small blind calls. What the hell do these people have? No one knows, but they're not going to see a turn for that price. I raised to 150. Onto the gun plus 1 folds. The hijack says, cool check raise, bro, but I'm not impressed. He makes it 550. The cutoff, button, and small blind evacuate the area. There's not much for me to do. I rip it for 12-10 total, and I get snap called. I turn over the goods. The opponent has pocket 7s for a set. We're not nearly out of the woods yet. We're going to need to fade all 8s, 4s, and case 7. The turn is safe. It's the 3 of hearts. I've still got the nuts. Please don't pair the board. The river is the king of hearts. We cooler the opponent, winning a massive pot of over 2,500. All the chips are pushed towards me. We're in for almost 2 buy-ins, but we're currently up 600 on the night. A few minutes later, we're dealt 9-8 suited on the button. This one's 5-handed. The only rec player here opens to 80 from under the gun. He's the guy that I'm most focused on getting involved in hands with. I call a pretty standard sized open for this game. It's still more than the entire amount that I'd buy in for when I was playing 3-6 limit at casinos as an 18-year-old in college. The big blind also calls. We're going 3 ways to the flop. It's 10-7-6 rainbow. We flop the absolute nuts. I can't even remember the last time I flopped a straight. It seems like everything is aligned for us today. The big blind checks. I almost go into shock as the pre-flop raiser bets 300. It's difficult for me to even fathom that this is real life right now. This guy is betting more than the pot, and I have the best hand possible. Raising seems a bit ridiculous. Flatting will look incredibly strong as well. Typically, I don't slow play straights. Here it seems like by far the best option to set the trap. I call, the big blind folds, we're heads up, the turn is the 5 of clubs, it's safe, we still have the nuts, and pick up a flush draw that I've never wanted to hit less in my life. After overbetting previously, under the gun bets 400. It's less than half the size of the pot. I'm not going to let him off the hook that easily. No more slow playing, it's time to make a move. I raised to 1100. I can't tell you how good this feeling is at the moment. I'm still kind of in disbelief that I put 1100 out there and still have piles of chips behind. I'm hoping that the player will jam for 1700 on top. I've got him covered. He's very deep in the tank. Finally, he makes the call. There's over 3,000 in the middle. The opponent has just over half a pot size bet left in the stack. This would be the perfect time for the deuce of hearts to come. Instead, the river is another 7, pairs the board. We no longer have the nuts. Under the gun checks. If he had 2 pair or better on the turn, he probably wouldn't have bet less than half the pot. Feels like he has an overpair, something like ace 10. I'm certainly not checking back. There's only one move to make.
I'm all in. All in.
You're all in, man.
Kings.
I'm shocked that he lays down pocket kings face up after getting almost 3-1 on a call. It's actually super impressive, and I give him some credit for letting it go, but he's not having it.
Nice fold.
Interesting that he doesn't believe that I had a strong hand, yet somehow he made the right play. A massive pot for a normal day in my life is pushed towards us. This is going infinitely better than I imagined. I've got queen 5 suited in the big blind. Merle straddles under the gun for 50. Middle position player calls, as does the cutoff. The button calls. I call for 45 more because I'm getting a decent price, and really I'm looking for any excuse to get involved when Merle's going to be in the hand. A fold is obviously reasonable as well. The flop comes Jack 10-8, all clubs. I check. Merle and the middle position player both check. The cutoff bets 75. The button folds. You'd think this is where the hand ends for me, and I'm going to fold because my hand is basically worthless. Nope. I put in a surprise raise to 250, making a purely exploitative play that I almost would never make, except in a previous hand, I saw the cutoff bet small on almost the same type of monotone, connected board with only middle pair. I've also seen him make some relatively big laydowns when facing strength. Seems to play somewhat timidly in those instances. I definitely don't recommend anyone try doing this. It's just an unnecessarily risky play, especially with 2 others behind me. The only backup plan I have is to hit a gutter, even though I could already be drawing dead. Under the gun and middle position both fold. Cutoff makes the call. This is not a situation I like being in, but he didn't re-raise, so maybe the opponent doesn't love his hand. Perhaps he only has something like the ace of clubs for an ace high flush draw. Luckily for us, the dealer puts out the 9 of diamonds, giving us the queen high straight. Our hand goes from having no value to all of a sudden having quite a bit. We're beating sets, 2 pair hands, and ace high flush draws. I bet 600 to deny equity from all those types of holdings, and we're likely in the lead. The cutoff tanks for a very long time. Then we see him toss his cards in the middle, and it's shocking what he lays down face up. He folds queen 6 of clubs. He had the queen high flush and thought that I had the stones. My read on the situation was wrong in that he happened to be betting with a hand that was very strong on the flop, but I was right with my observation that he can sometimes play timidly when facing aggression.
Well, you're not gonna like this on the vlog.
Yeah, why would you?
I had a straight, I didn't have a flush.
Well, I'm not gonna know unless you show me.
I'd queen 5 of spades. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, actually, I thought I was going to hate it until you explained your reasoning. And I think that like, those 2 reads, having seen him do that with a weaker hand and having seen him fold to aggression, I think are the perfect reasons to make a very unorthodox play like that. You do have the 2 people behind you, but usually when they check, especially the pre-flop raiser.
Well, it was a straddle for 50.
Oh, it was a straddle for 50 and then a call. Okay. So usually, even still the first caller, like, sort of has initiative.
It's basically like a raise, because like people are limping, like you saw the guy limp in with queens earlier for 80, right? So like if it's just a lot of money pre-flop, people are just limping when they would normally be raising or whatever.
Yeah, cool. So I find that people there, when they check, either have a weak hand or a hand that like wants to call one small bet. So when it goes bet raise, even though his bet's small and their raise is not that big, I think you make them fold a lot.
Yeah.
And so with the read on him, I actually think it is a good play.
That's great, because I would get torched in the comment section normally. So I
didn't
appreciate that.
like seeing the hand and hearing you talk about it. Like I was like, there's no way I'm gonna like this play. It turns out I think I do.
All right, cool. Some time goes by before we pick up King Jack of diamonds in middle position. There's a $20 button straddle. The big blind limps in. Under the gun calls for 20 as well. That's not enough money. I raise to 100. The big blind and under the gun both call. We're going 3 ways to the flop. In position comes queen 9-8 with 2 clubs. We've got a gutter and 1 over. The big blind surprisingly takes a $100 chip off the top of his stack and leads into the rest of us. The under the gun player folds. I'm getting a good price with a draw to the nuts and big implied odds. I call 1 time. We're heads up. The turn is the miracle 10 of diamonds. We get the 3 outer for the best hand possible. The big blind isn't worried about there being 4 to the straight on the board. He fires for 200. I'm definitely not going to slow play this. I want to get as much money in now as I can. I slide in a raise to 500. Maybe it'll induce a bluff shove or a shove from my opponent if he's holding one of the other 3 jacks. Everything goes exactly according to plan. I immediately call the jam for 1780 effective. The big blind has me covered and we're not chopping. The opponent shows that he has jack 9 of clubs. He flopped middle pair and a straight flush draw. We both got there on the turn, but I've got the winner as long as there's no club or king on the river. It's a pot of over $4,000 and we're only running it once, so there's max pain for one of us. If I lose, I'll be stuck 4,500 on the night, and if I win, I'll be close to even. The river is the jack of spades. There's a straight on board, but I've got the king high straight to win it all. Nothing had been going my way tonight, but finally, we're on the right side of a cooler. After verifying the count of my stack, the biggest pot of the night is headed our direction. Next, we look down at 7-4 hearts in the big blind. The button raises to 15. The small blind calls. I'm getting a good price with suited cards that can make a straight. I call. We're going 3 ways to the flop without high expectations since our starting hand isn't great, but 7-4 of hearts under promises and over delivers. The dealer puts out 6-5-3 with 2 hearts. We've got a straight with an open-ended straight flush redraw. I had a royal flush draw in the session from earlier today at Bellagio, so this is the 3rd straight flush draw that I've had within a short time frame. I've still never captured my own straight flush on a vlog. It'd be cool to do it here. The small blind checks. I check to the pre-flop raiser, hoping that he'll have something or will at least make a bluff attempt. He comes through with a bet of 35. The small blind calls. I've got almost nothing to worry about. If I didn't have hearts, I'd raise. Since I've got 2 of them, I call. All 3 of us are still in, and the turn is the queen of clubs. The small blind checks. Let's see if the button wants to fire a second bullet. I check to him again. He may suspect that something's up after getting 2 calls on the flop. He checks back. The river is the 4 of diamonds. It's a terrible card since now there are 4 to the straight. It's possible that someone else is taking the lead with 8-7 or is chopping with us, or will no longer want to put any more money in the middle. Small blind checks. I can't allow this to check through. I bet 110 in order to represent a fake missed flush draw. The button has air and folds immediately. Not the small blind though. He snap calls.
Blocked it, but 2-3. Oh, low end.
It turns out the 4 was actually a great card. We may not have gotten paid off. It had been something different. Small blind has spent way too much time studying revenge range charts and gets punished for playing 3-deuce offsuit. We capitalize and are up over 1100. 40 minutes later, we've got 9-8 suited on the button. The cutoff raises to 100. He's perhaps the best player in the game, the one who hero called my $3,000 bluff earlier with 3rd pair to make me question my career as a poker player. I call in position with a playable hand. Trigger to Troy isn't afraid to get involved this time. He calls from the small blind. We're going 3 ways to the flop in position. The dealer puts out 7-6-4 all hearts. We might already be drawing dead even with a gut shot. We all check. The turn is the 5 of clubs, giving us a 6-card straight. Troy must have a piece. He bets 220. That's too much for the cutoff. He folds. We almost for sure had the best hand unless Troy flopped a flush. I make a sneaky call. We already know that Troy is wary when I make aggressive raises. I don't want to scare him off with the raise here. If we can get a blank on the river, we might be able to raise for value at that point, or at least we can potentially get another bet in. It's heads up. The river is the king of hearts, putting 4 hearts on board. I hate seeing it. It's unclear whether or not Troy's happy about it. We get some indication as he bets 240. It's a very small sizing. It looks like a blocker bet. Our hand has been significantly downgraded. I'm not sure if we're best or if Troy may have some sort of small flush. Either way, it appears that he's trying to get to showdown cheaply. I'm not 100% sure that we can win with the call, but I'm very confident that Troy won't want to call a raise, and he's already made it seem like he's reluctant to play big pots with me. When you understand what your opponent is trying to accomplish with their actions, disappoint him. I announce a raise to 800. Troy is surely disappointed as he folds before our chips hit the felt. It's possible that we had the best hand anyway. The king wasn't a great card. After being down 5,500 early on, we've done well to come back. At the moment, we're only down 1,300 and we're not going anywhere. The straddle to 800 is on. Dylan picks up king-queen offsuit on the button. He's a high-stakes pro from Las Vegas who I've actually played with a handful of times and included in multiple vlogs. He's very talented and has an extremely bright future in poker. He's only in his early 20s right now. Dylan raises to 2,500. We've got ace-jack offsuit in the small blind. You're never really supposed to be flatting from the small blind when the straddle's on. You're supposed to be 3-betting or folding. If you call, it allows the players behind you to have a really good price, and you generally don't want to be playing from out of position against multiple players. You also don't want to set it up for the players behind you to put on a squeeze play. Folding a hand even as good as ace-jack offsuit is completely reasonable, even against the button open, but we see Doug accidentally fold out of turn, so I don't need to worry about him coming along behind us with a call or 3-bet. I just call, which is totally fine to do when the straddle isn't on and only one player is left to act behind you. We're heads up against the button. The flop comes queen 10-3 with 2 diamonds. We've got a gutter with 1 over. I check. Dylan likes the flop with top pair. He's not going to let us see a free one. The button bets 4,800. I'm not in the mood to let go of our hand. We've got a decent amount going for us. Ace high might even be best sometimes. I make the call to see if we can drill a miracle card, giving us the nuts. The dealer is a friend of mine named Kevin. What do friends do when times are tough? They come through in the clutch, giving you the exact card you need to win a massive pot. Clutch Kevin, that's what we call him. I can't tell you how happy I am to see the King of Hearts. I check because this will typically be a better card for the pre-flop aggressor, and it certainly is a card that improves Dylan's hand to top 2 pair. The button won't typically be putting us on ace-jack offsuit after we just called the raise pre-flop. He's not overly worried as he bets 10,800 for value. We've got just over 66,000 in front of us and need to figure out the best way to get as much in there as we can. A jam is reasonable. I might do that as a bluff in some instances, but I don't want to scare the opponent off of a top pair type of hand or even some 2-pair combos. I go with a relatively small sizing at 25,000. There's still enough room for Dylan to come over the top and jam for 40,000 if he doesn't have much and wants to turn his hand into a bluff. I'd actually expect him to potentially jam straights, sets, and perhaps even king-queen to get value before a scare card comes on the river that completes one of the draws that are present. The opponent takes his time to process the situation. Eventually, he calls for 15,000 more. This is a high-intensity scenario. We're in a $66,000 pot. We've got 40,000 effective. I've never rooted so hard for a blank in my life. The river is the deuce of spades. We couldn't have gotten a more ideal run out. We've got 60% of a pot size bet left in our stack. There's only one play to make at this point. Like Eric Clapton on stage alongside Mick Jagger, we rip it with the stones. Now all we can do is wait. There's over $100,000 in the middle one more time. The pot is ginormous, and Dylan is getting over 2.5 to 1 on a call. As strong as his hand is, there aren't really worse hands than king-queen that I'll be playing this way and jamming for value, so Dylan kind of only has a bluff catcher with his top 2 pair. A call here will nearly get me unstuck for the session, which I had little hope for before this. Dylan is deep in the tank. A minute goes by. 2 minutes go by, and the opponent still hasn't come to a decision. 3 minutes have elapsed. Still no decision. I'm not moving at all. 3.5 minutes go by. Then Dylan finally makes the call. We turn over the nuts. It's a pot of 146,800 that's coming to us. It's by far the largest pot that I've ever won, and the only one that I've ever won over 100,000. If you haven't hit the like and subscribe buttons yet, what are we waiting for? This one is a huge confidence booster that changes what seemed like an insurmountable deficit to overcome into one that's way more manageable. As glad as I am to take this down, I still know that I have work to do, and I'm still slightly stuck, so I can't celebrate too much just yet. 2 hands into the 5th table, we've got our old friend 10-8 in the big blind. The player on our left raises to 15. His name's Gabe, no relation to Gabe Lewis from The Office, although as I mentioned earlier, there is someone else from Scranton here. A player in middle position calls, the button calls. We doubled up last time we were dealt 10-8, and if you're a probabilities guy like me, you know that independent events is a make-believe term similar to bankroll management or GTO. None of those things are real. In fact, if you make a monster with a certain 2 cards early on in a session, you're something like 17 times more likely to make another strong hand after being dealt the same 2 cards later on in the session. It's just math. For that reason alone, I defend my big blind and call for 10 more. 4 of us are seeing the flop. It's Jack-9 deuce rainbow. We've got an open-ended straight draw. I check. The under-the-gun player gathers some chips and bets 30. The middle position opponent calls. The button calls. We've got a draw to the nuts and are getting a good price. We call as well. There's still 4 of us in there. A nice sized pot is developing. I don't mind it because the turn is the queen of clubs, giving us the second nuts and confirming that 10-8 is our hand of the day. I check, service stops by our table, the under the gun player puts in an order for $75 worth of pain, the short stack in middle position just flats, the button folds. Just like most members of 80s rock bands, straights don't tend to age well. We need to get as much money in now as possible before the board pairs, a club comes out, or a fourth straight card comes on the river. We raised to 300. It's a bit scary because the under the gun player continued betting into 3 opponents. It wouldn't be shocking if he had king 10 for the higher straight. I'm even more suspicious that this could be true when we hear the following speech.
Second hand.
All in.
I really enjoyed that. As far as speeches go for me, I'd rank it slightly below I Have a Dream, but probably above JFK's inaugural address. Under the Gun brings Jesus into this, then jams for 1125 effective. That's how much I have in my stack, and he has me covered. To make things more interesting, the middle position player calls for 440 total. Something doesn't quite feel right here. We must be up against some massive hands.
All in.
Jesus Christ, Brad. First hand he says, then he rips it, and then a call. I mean, I'm never folding. Okay.
We're all amateurs here, so we
Once or twice.
don't know how to play.
Just do once.
I got 440 for the main, for the middle.
Okay.
We're running it once in a huge 3-way all-in. There's a big main pot and almost an equally large side pot between me and the under the gun player. If we can at least win the side pot, we'll still profit a minimum of $200 on the hand. If we can also win the main pot, we'll be up close to $800 on the session. The issue is that we still don't know what cards we have to fade, or if we can even win this outright. We could be drawing dead to a chop. Once all the players put 440 into the main pot, we're ready to find out our fate. Pots close to $3,000 don't happen all that frequently in 2-5. The river is the 7 of spades, it's a blank. I'm still not sure if we've got the winner though. The under the gun player turns over pocket queens for a turn top set. We beat him for the $1,400 side pot. We turn over the straight, while the player in middle position who had the short stack turns over king 10 for the higher straight. He'll win the main pot. I'm just glad that we beat the under the gun player who must have thought that he had the best hand going into the river, because right before the river came out, he didn't ask for the board to pair. Instead, he wished for no club, which means that he must have put me on a flush draw. We get a count of my chips to determine how much Gabe owes me. The total comes to 685. That one could have been a giant disaster for us. Luckily, the hand ends up going well as we come out ahead $200.